Hi, I'm Jean Shafiroff, and I'm on a mission. Anyone can be a philanthropist. My television show came from my book, Successful Philanthropy: How to Make a Life by What You Give. Won't you join me? Welcome to Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff, and this show is all about giving. With us today, US Representative Carolyn Maloney. And politics is all about giving back to our country and to our people. Let's all welcome Carolyn Maloney. And Carolyn, it's so nice to have you with us today. Carolyn, can you tell us a little bit about your tenure in Congress? It's been a long tenure, and I know our audience wants to hear all about it.
Well, it's a great honor, the honor of my life, to serve the residents that I represent on the Upper East Side, on Greenpoint and Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and in Astoria, Queens, and Long Island City, Queens. I represent 3 different boroughs. And during that time, you represent their concerns in Congress, and I'm very proud of all the work that I've done. I've put up over 7 affordable housing units or buildings for senior citizens. But during that period, I built the only subway, not in New York City, not in New York State, but in the whole country, was built in the district that I've been privileged to represent. The Lexington Avenue line was the busiest line in the whole nation. It was lines to get on the train. The Second Avenue subway had been promised for 100 years. I made it my top priority. And the first leg of the Second Avenue subway has opened up between roughly 62nd Street and 96th Street, alleviating not the lines anymore. There's been a whole revival of economic development there. And we're working now to build it up to 125th Street. On day one, over 300,000 people traveled on the Second Avenue subway. That's more than travel on public transportation in most of the cities in the United States. So in New York City, the city that never sleeps, the Second Avenue subway is one of my prime goals and prime achievements. Also, I had the Kosciuszko Bridge that connects the Brooklyn and Queens area of my district. I secured $825 million to revamp that bridge. It was the worst bridge in the whole state. It's now the most beautiful. 9 different lanes, totally modern, no lines, beautifully designed, lighting. It's a gorgeous bridge. Then after Sandy, the L train was really injured to connecting Brooklyn and Queens, and I secured over $1 billion to have that modernized. And also the connection between Manhattan on 63rd Street and Queensbridge, the F line, that used to call it the train to nowhere. We connected Manhattan and Queens there. Those are a few of my sites that I worked with monies from the federal government to help with the infrastructure of New York City. I'm very proud of that. And then there's the Esplanade along the river. It started with just one small grant to study it. It's now been over $1 billion, and parts of it are absolutely beautiful. We have a wonderful waterway, but there was no access to it. And we worked very hard to beautify it on both the Queens side around Queensbridge with the pier, but also on the east side of Manhattan. I'm very proud of the work that we did with the community to make that happen. And I'm very proud about what happened to Jean this week in Congress. We voted on a $1.9 trillion economic COVID relief plan that Joe Biden has put forward, and $350 billion went through the committee that I now chair, the Oversight Committee. And this was for cities and states. And for our own city and our own state, over $23.3 billion in direct aid for the state of New York, and over $5.6 billion for the city of New York. And overall, it was roughly $70 billion going to the city and state of New York in areas that are needed, whether it was helping people stay in their homes or or food or modernization, all of these areas that help people. And for the MTA, over $8.8 billion to go to the MTA, plus the direct payments to individuals and families, the extended unemployment assistance. So all of this is money that is desperately needed by our city. In 2020, we had tremendous fights with the Republicans. They didn't want to give money to city and states. And now elections make consequences. We did, as I said, have now a $70 billion program in various needs going to the great city and state of New York.
Yes, and no question, New York City needs to be revived because this pandemic has really taken its toll on not only New York City, New York State, but the entire world. And so I think the stimulus passage was important, and I think will really help our city. And I'm so thankful to you, Carolyn, for helping this move forward. And Carolyn, can you talk a little bit about some of the other issues that you've been involved with? I know you've been involved with a new women's museum that will open up one day in Washington, D.C. And we are in Women's History Month, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I've been a long time proponent for the Equal Rights Amendment, and I've had trouble getting Republicans supporting it. So I was walking around the mall one day trying to figure out how I could work across the aisle to finally ratify and get in the Constitution the Equal Rights Amendment. And I started seeing all these museums for textiles, law and order, space, arts, you name it. I was thinking, where are the women? I walked all around the mall. There are all kinds of museums. There wasn't one for half the population of America. So I thought, this will be easy. I'll put this in and it'll pass easily. Who could be opposed to it? So I put the bill in. 20 years later, I still hadn't passed it. It wasn't that I didn't try. I passed a lot of bills, and so I was working very hard. But this past year, they did finally pass it, and it's going to be built on the mall in Washington. I'm very excited about it. During that time, I thought that there wasn't a women's museum on the mall. Then I found out there wasn't a museum anywhere for the women. They had what I call sliver museums. We have a museum in upstate New York for Seneca Falls for the first women's rights convention. There's a museum in Washington for women in the arts. There's one in the West Coast for the women who came across in stagecoaches, but not one that looked at the contributions of women in philanthropy, in the arts, in education, in science, and all the areas that women are now playing such an important role. So I'm thrilled that this bill that I authored finally passed. During that time, I did a study on all of the historic sites in America. And out of the many hundreds of American sites, only few, like 5, were dedicated in any way to women. And there were not any of the statues. When you look in Washington, Washington is a city of statues. I think everybody thinks they're one of these statues, or should be one of them, but very few dedicated to women that were half the population. So this was long overdue. I remember as a little girl going to libraries and wanting to read about women, and I couldn't find any books about women. I finally found a series about first ladies. But it's changed now, because this year we now have a third of Congress's women. We now have the first female vice president, the first female speaker, and so many women members that are chairman of committees, such as myself. So there's been a sea change of representation, and it's important that the stories of everyone in America be told, not just the men. They deserve their story, but every other museum has been to the presidents of the United States and the leaders, which have been men. So it's wonderful that we will now have her story. So young men and young women going to the Capitol will see the contributions of half the population also in this new Women's History Museum. I'm very excited about it.
And when do you think it might open up?
Well, Lonnie Williams, who's the head of the Smithsonian, this will be a Smithsonian museum, part of the whole area. He predicts it will take us 10 years to build this museum.
So we're quite a ways away from that opening up, but just the fact that it's going to happen really is so incredibly important. And now you are the chairman of the Committee of Oversight and Reform. What exactly is the Committee for Oversight and Reform?
Well, this committee is an investigative committee. It looks at waste, fraud, and abuse. It looks at policies that need to be changed. We've been conducting a series of hearings on the high cost of prescription drugs and ways that we can reform that. Specifically, we have a bill in that would allow the government to negotiate with drug companies for lower prices. Now we help drug companies do pay for their research, but then the prices in America are much, much higher than in Europe, where they negotiate lower prices, or any other country in the world, to give one example. During the last election, there were a lot of challenges over mail-in ballots and the Postal Service. We're having a hearing next week with the Postal Service, and we have legislation to reform it, to make it more efficient, put it on stronger financial basis. We look at problems confronting the country and investigate it. After January 6th, which was, I'd say, one of the darkest days in the history of our country, we lost control of our country. They took over when we were certifying the ballots for President Biden. They literally disrupted the government of the United States of America. That's never happened before. I never thought it would ever happen in our country. It was very shocking, and really still is shocking to me that it could happen, that it did happen. We went back in and continued our work and certified. It was at roughly 4 o'clock in the morning when we finally left and went home. But there have been many investigations in my committee on with the FBI, on what did they know, how did they react that day, what are they doing to hold people accountable. It came out that there were many off-duty police officers, believe it or not, that were part of the insurrection. So we want to know how deep is that around the country. And Parler was a platform that sort of they used to organize and to incite the violence with very attacking language specific to people and places, and be here and take over the Capitol on the 6th, take over the Capitol on the 19th. So we're investigating all of these organizing tools to see who paid for it, where did it come from, how did it happen. We are going to be working on a 9/11 type commission bill that we did after 9/11. Again, another very sad and dramatic Black day in our history. We came together and created a bipartisan commission. It came back with roughly 51 recommendations. We implemented 49 of them. They did a report on what was missing, why was this able to happen in our country. It was basically our intelligence system hadn't kept up with the changes. The report, the 9/11 Commission report, sold more copies than Harry Potter. But most importantly, we implemented the recommendations to make this country safer. So we're going to be looking at the insurrection of the Capitol. How was it planned? How did it happen? And how can we in the future make sure that this doesn't happen again? So
yes, and I think all of us, I'm sorry for interrupting, but we were all in a state of shock and frightened over what happened. And I'm sorry for interrupting, Carolyn.
You're right. I think we were all, I couldn't believe my eyes that they were ransacking the Capitol of the United States. I never thought that I would ever see that. It's very sad now at the Capitol. There are guardsmen everywhere. There are these fences with barbed wire. It's very impossible to drive around the Capitol. It looks more like an army camp, really, than the Capitol of the United States. And I hope we'll be able to return eventually to normal. with an inviting entrance for our people to come to the Capitol. But now it's as a reaction for safety. There are many guards everywhere. And as I said, these fences with barbed wire to make sure people aren't entering when they're not supposed to be there. It's a different challenge and a different time at the Capitol now. A very sad time, I would say.
Now, we really need our country, I believe, to come together. And what are you involved with right now that will bring our country together? Because I think we are very divided. And as they say, a country divided becomes a weakened country. And so we need to strengthen as a country so that we can strengthen our people and the lives of our people, and also to preserve democracy.
Well, it's very important. I truly believe, and I'm a legislator, so I always try to work in a bipartisan way. I truly believe that the best legislation is always bipartisan. Otherwise, when you shift back and forth in the leadership of the House and the Senate and the presidency, they just throw out what the prior administration did when it's all done alone. Only when you work together does it become permanent change for the country. And you see that now in the many executive orders that changed the actions of President Obama that Trump put in, and now President Biden's in, and he's overturning a lot of the executive orders. And only when you work together does it become permanent. So I am working very hard on working across the aisle. I am working on postal reform, and the ranking member of the committee on which I serve is working with me. So we're working on a bipartisan postal bill and working on a bipartisan bill on the pandemic insurance, on the insurance for the emergencies that we had with COVID. There is no real insurance program for business disruption. And so we are looking going forward on pandemic risk insurance. Right now, the biggest challenge is to the COVID crisis is the vaccine is really ahead of the vaccinations, and we need to get the vaccinations ahead of the virus. Otherwise, we will keep running into more mutations and more infections on our people. So that's, I think, our number one challenge right now.
And how many years do you think New York State is away from getting over this pandemic and before we all get back to some type of normal life in New York City? I think many of us, I'm a New York City resident, and it's very sad for me to see the city in lockdown or in a partial lockdown. And I'm hopeful about New York coming back. I believe absolutely it will come back stronger than ever. But I want to hear from you how many years you think this pandemic is going to take to go through whatever it's going through, and then when will our lives go back to normal?
Our lives will go back to normal once we get everybody vaccinated, and we need to make sure that we take care of the health and security of our people, and the way we do that is by vaccinating them. President Biden has called for 200 million doses to be developed during his first 100 days in office. He said in his town hall this week that he expected to have 600 million doses of the vaccine distributed by July. So I would think that that would cover every citizen or every person living in America. So it's really to produce and distribute the vaccine and get it into people's arms and out of the warehouses or out of the manufacturing centers. The bill that we passed has a lot of money for vaccines. It has a lot of money for testing and for tracing. Another important component of being able to open up. I see basically that the virus is in a race with the vaccinations that we need, and the virus is winning. It's out front. We have to get out in front of the virus with everybody being vaccinated in order to open up. People are not going to feel secure going into businesses if they are not vaccinated, and know that the other people that are there are vaccinated. So that's what I think they need. The president has said he expects it to open up in end of July.
Yes, now this show is all about philanthropy, and Carolyn Maloney, I have observed that you are a great supporter of many different charities and many different philanthropic efforts. I remember when I published my book, Successful Philanthropy, How to Make a Life by What You Give, you gave me a book signing party.
I remember that.
I loved, and I'm ever so grateful. You did it in your home in New York City. But tell our audience a little bit about the importance of philanthropy and supporting charity and what that means to you.
Well, it's very, very important to support charity, and I think that that's an important part of life. We have a government that is generous and is needed to support, but many private people donate to hospitals, museums, adopt causes, adopt children, sponsor and pay educations of children to go to school that need it. So it's an important part. But on the other hand, the federal government has to be there with the educational opportunities, the housing, the protections. You can't totally rely on charity. You need the federal government to provide the services. And we are fortunate that in New York State and New York City, we have leaders on all levels that provide the services that the people need. It's been an incredibly difficult year for this country. We lost 500,000 lives, more than were lost during World War II, and millions of people are out of work. So we need these programs, the unemployment insurance, the direct grants to people. All of this is in the COVID relief bill. And after the COVID relief bill, we're doing an economic recovery bill so that hope and health are on the way with these two pieces of legislation, which we hope to get passed out of Washington and into people's lives in the communities across America.
Yes, and there's no question that government, businesses, and private individuals, we all have to work together to move forward and to propel our country and our world forward. And philanthropy is one aspect, government is another, and together we can achieve a lot. And I truly believe that. Now, Carolyn, do you have a favorite charity?
I would say education. I'm a former teacher, so I volunteer and I support any educational efforts. I think
I
that's
like
the
that.
answer many of our problems. If you can educate people, they can understand, then we're a much stronger nation. And if we give equal opportunity in education, then we can develop our people to serve to a better degree. That's why equality of rights and equality of education is so important. When I was growing up, I was competing with a pencil and who was sitting next to me. Now we're competing with the world. Our students have to compete with the world. So they have to be really trained on all of the new technological advances. And we need to have broadband so that everyone can have access to computers and advanced learning tools. And it's important for our country to help prepare our young people to the best of their ability. Because we are competing with the world and we need to educate our people to the very best that they can do. And if you're well educated, you can get a good job and you can give back to your country and to the world in a more beneficial way for the world.
No question, education really opens doors. And I always say to all young people, get as much education as you possibly can, because that education can never be taken away from you. And it looks good on your resume, but more important than that, with a little education behind you, you can do many new things and achieve a lot. And Carolyn, we have just a few minutes left. What advice would you give to young people besides getting a great education? What would you tell young people maybe words of wisdom about how you achieved what you've done in your life, because you've achieved so much. You started as a school teacher, as you mentioned, and you've been in government for a very long time. You're doing so many great things, but what advice do you give to all young people?
Well, I would say never let anyone tell you that you can't do something. Just look at the fools who do. You just have to get out there and try and believe in yourself, and don't let people discourage you. Every time I've run for office, people tell me, oh, you can't win. Why are you doing that? Or you can't build that subway. They haven't built it in 10 years. You can't build a museum on the mall. Are you kidding? That's never going to happen. Well, it did happen because I took a goal and I worked on it, and I achieved it. I even passed a bill that they say saves consumers over 10 billion a year by keeping money in their pockets and not going to unfair fines and fees. So if you have a goal, work on it and make it happen. I would also say never let the minor interfere with the major, and take care of your family and your children and your husband and your life. That's very important, even as you are involved like you are in so many different causes and concerns. And I know that I see you at so many important announcements and efforts that are channeled at helping people. So I think have a goal and stick to it, and don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. If you believe in yourself and you think it's important, get out there and achieve it and make it happen. We're so fortunate to live in the great United States of America, and there's so many opportunities for all of our people to participate and to grow and to give back as you have. Thank you, Jean, for all that you've done for our country. I'm very appreciative.
Well, and thank you, Carolyn, for all you've done and for your words of advice. And no question, if you believe in yourself, you can achieve a lot. And I always say, never let anyone tell you that you can't. Dream big and you will achieve big. And Carolyn, you have been an absolutely wonderful guest. Thank you so much for joining Successful Philanthropy. And one final thing, as we look forward to the next 4 years, what's on the horizon past COVID-19? What do you see happening in the United States?
I think the best is yet to come. I think we become stronger with our allies around the world, and that there's more opportunities for the people in our country, that we have improved healthcare and accessible healthcare. And just this COVID package is going to help in so many ways, help people stay in their homes and protect them. And it has all kinds of benefits for childcare and for really improved healthcare. So I think I see a brighter future for America and for our citizens working together towards that goal.
I like that. This concludes Successful Philanthropy. I'm your host, Jean Shafiroff. I'll see you next week.